Hello, everyone. On behalf of Ardent Partners, I'd like to welcome you to this exclusive webinar from our flagship procurement research study, CPO Rising 2018, The Age of Intelligence. My name is Matt York, and I'll be serving as the moderator for today's webinar. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a research analyst here at Ardent Partners and editor of our daily media site, CPORising.com, where I write about sourcing, procurement, and emerging business technologies like artificial intelligence and blockchain. Now, let me tell you a little bit about us. Ardent Partners is a research and advisory firm that's focused on defining and advancing the supply management strategies, processes, and technologies that drive business value and accelerate organizational transformation within the enterprise. Ardent Partners actively covers the supply management marketplace and produces research to help business decision makers understand, one, industry best practices and how to improve performance, and two, the technology landscape and how to identify the best fit solution or solutions for their specific budget and requirements. And now, here's a little bit about our daily media site. CPO Rising is the first independent site designed exclusively for Chief Procurement Officers. If you like today's webinar, we encourage you to visit CPORising.com for more insights, best practices, procurement and technology news, and thought leadership discussions. The site frequently features content from Ardent's premier analyst team with a focus across all areas of supply management, including strategic sourcing, analytics, contract management, financial management, and complex spend management. And now a word from our sponsor. Determine is a leading global provider of cloud platform-based modular source-to-pay and enterprise contract management solutions. The company serves more than 250 global customers spanning industries from the financial services to healthcare, retail, transportation, and many others. In today's dynamic economic climate, more and more companies rely on Determine for the innovative technology that will help turn previously unseen supplier, contract, and spend data into leverageable business intelligence. Now, let me introduce today's speakers. Kevin Turner is the Senior Vice President of Customer Success at Determine. He is responsible for driving value-based objectives with customers and customer advocacy of Determine's rapidly expanding customer base. A recognized customer success innovator and practitioner in the procurement and source-to-pay industry, Kevin brings more than 20 years of experience in the e-business, e-commerce, and SaaS profession to Determine. An award-winning, in-demand industry evangelist, Kevin has applied his expertise in designing and implementing strategic transformational customer programs to a range of leading public and private entities. Welcome, Kevin.
Hey, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Next up, Andrew Bartolini is Ardent's founder and chief research officer and a globally recognized expert in supply management and procurement. And with that, I will pass it off to Andrew.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Hello, everybody. Hello and good day. I'm really excited to talk about the key research findings of my annual CPO Rising report. This is the 13th year of the study. And I'm, excited to, discuss with Kevin some of those key findings. The agenda you see here maps to the design and layout of the report. The report will be available soon, probably in a couple of weeks. And those of you that have registered, will be getting a copy of that in your inbox as soon as it's available. Now, this is a pretty content-rich presentation, so we're going to move pretty quickly through the slides. Everybody will be getting a copy of the slides. Determine will be sending those out, directly. I want to talk a little bit about our research process. As I mentioned, this is the 13th annual CPO themed report that I've conducted personally. I've conducted more than 100 studies like this of its nature over the past 12 years. And this specific study is part of an ongoing dialogue that my team at Ardent and I have had with CPOs and other procurement leaders for more than a decade. The report and today's presentation examines the general competencies and capabilities of procurement organizations today and highlights the strategies and tactics that leading CPOs use to get the most from their teams. As you can see here, the data is drawn from more than 320 CPOs. and other procurement executives. As part of this process, myself and Matt York interviewed 17 leading global CPOs to add some context to the data and to the study, and enrich the report with some quotes as well. I guess the main point is that Ardent has a very deliberate process in how we conduct this type of research, and we believe that the report results are statistically meaningful and reflective of the market it represents. Now, the market it represents is a very senior procurement market, right? You can see from the function side on the right that 85% coming directly from procurement, a few coming from the associated business functions. It's a pretty senior audience, that we've gotten to participate in our research this year and in other years past, right? With more than 60 coming in at the director level or higher. From an industry perspective, it's very horizontal. So there's no industry that's represented by more than 13%, I think, in this year's study. The breakdown you see here is both company size and region, right? So the data does tilt towards the large enterprise, and it does tilt towards North America, but has a fair representation of those that fall outside of those two segments. So brings us to the state of the Chief Procurement Officer, right? And the major eras of the modern age, agricultural, industrial, and digital, have each been identified as revolutions that broke the continuum of human progress and placed it on a new, higher trajectory. More than simply recategorizing businesses and societies, winners and losers, these revolutions really changed the game, both completely and forever. And, while there were different factors that helped shape and define those eras, each shared common inputs, right? Those inputs would be innovative ideas and new technology that resulted in a common output, which are remarkable advances in productivity. And that each era really sort of was a direct byproduct of the one that preceded it. Now, we're not saying that the digital revolution is far from over, but what we are saying is that it has only recently created a vast new opportunity from the literal explosion of new data. And in 2018, businesses and consumers are now fully engulfed by technology and the data it both creates and captures. And this holds true for procurement departments, those of you listening in, right, across the globe, the procurement departments who continue to rise in both prominence and impact within their enterprises. And as we move into this age of intelligence, procurement teams now more than ever must continue to extend and enhance their capabilities in order to maintain their momentum and accelerate to the next level of performance. And for the CPO and procurement, this really is the dawning of the age of intelligence. And so let's start by taking a look at the state of the CPO in 2018. And so by starting, right, people first, right, one of the CPO's major challenges is also a major opportunity: finding, training, and retaining a team that can execute the CPO's broad vision and support the CPO's expanding purview. There are different views on where to start, but the end point for best-in-class CPOs is finding the optimal mix of talented staff, the right processes, and the systems to support them. Now, I think this is an interesting slide as a representation of procurement's longer-term transformation that we've seen. Right, this is a cycle that I've worked in this industry for about 20 years, and procurement's come a long way, but as this chart shows, there's still a long way yet still to go. If we were to go back to the first year that I did this study, close to between 40 and 50% of procurement organizations, were operating without a really refined strategic plan that was used to really allocate resources and focus energies on specific activities. We fast forward to today, and most procurement organizations are run in a professional manner, right? There's a CPO or a head of procurement, a VP of procurement, someone who's a single point of contact that leads the procurement organization in more than 90% of organizations. And that wasn't always the case. Today, these CPOs, by and large, have and are using strategic plans often, or I'd say a majority are using a multi-year strategic plan. But what we see here is that the alignment between what they're focused on and what they're working on and what's most important to the enterprise and the executives within the enterprise in that same time period, almost 60% are not tightly aligned, and this is problematic for obvious reasons, and we'll just continue to move forward here. I think everybody sort of gets the challenge and the gap there. So that brings us to the CPO's top business pressures in 2018, and this is a question that we've asked in each of the years, and if we were to again go back a few years, 2008, 2009, specifically in 2009, 9 out of 10 CPOs had identified more cost savings as the top business pressure, right? So it was savings over and above everything else, and part of it was the context and the time in which the survey happened, right in the midst of the great global recession. But things have changed, and we have seen a steady decline in the intensity that the need to identify cost savings has rated. I think it's part a result of having really captured a lot of savings in the early years of the recovery. I think it's in part a result of procurement and being better understood within the organization. I think that CPOs have done a better job of communicating a more broad-based value proposition for CPOs. Now, Kevin, you've been engaged with a wide range of procurement companies over your years in this industry, and they have various levels of maturity and sophistication. And I'm curious what your take is on the business pressures here.
Yeah, I think it definitely is very interesting to see how the communication of that value is listed as the top business pressure. I've seen over the years companies invest in technology, to see if they're able to gain some sort of efficiencies throughout the process. Once they mature with their technology, start adopting that technology, they're able to identify additional cost savings that they can start, driving out of the organization. So, as they execute well, as they shift from, that cost center mode, that cost killer mode, into more of a value driver mode, I think it's very important to be able to articulate that value and be able to communicate that internally. And for them, as being seen as that value driver, it helps them get that coveted seat at the strategic table, right? It elevates that function within the organization, and it helps them gain traction within their own organization.
Yeah. Right. And so, I think also, right, so, I promise not to throw you any curveballs, but I'll go back to this chart here too, right? And so I know that one of the things that you're most focused on within, your work at Determined is helping organizations quantify, their successes and communicate those. And maybe you want to talk a little bit about some of the gaps that you've seen and some of the strategies that you've employed to help your customers succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll see a common theme across our discussion today on, how to drive value, not only driving value, but articulate that value, right? So, I can see, with this chart here, if I look at it, you've got, 94% that are partially or tightly aligned with business objectives. And I think it goes back to the history of, investing into technology. Will it work? How do I use it to drive more efficiencies within the process? Start to gain traction, right? And so then how do we identify additional cost savings opportunities? And then all of a sudden it becomes, how do we articulate that value? How do we measure that value and articulate it internally? And then once you identify those value drivers, or being able to articulate, you can correlate that to your overall business objectives. And then that's where I see procurement functions shift from being that cost killer organization to that value driver organization, because now they're able to tie, the things that they're doing, the processes they're put in place, and being able to articulate that and quantify that, and then they can tie that to the overall business objectives. And that's where they become that trusted strategic partner internally.
Right, and I think that's a great point and a great approach, right? And so, one of the CPO's top strategies over the years has been collaboration, really a top strategy and really a focal point. I was actually moderating a panel earlier today, and the CPO from a large global pharma company noted that the average tenure for CPOs now is less than 5 years, and if you're not collaborating well with the business in the first 18 months, you're certainly, not looking for a tenure that goes much longer than the average. But what's interesting is that, what we've seen in more recent times is that technology, has remained at the top of the list for CPOs in 2018, as it did in 2017. This has been a long time in coming, in my opinion. I think that CPOs have finally recognized and settled in with the idea that their headcounts are fairly capped and not likely to grow in any significant way in the near term. At the same time, procurement's responsibilities continue to expand, whether that's placing more spend under management or really taking on other responsibilities that are, sort of in proximity to traditional procurement operations, and that CPOs have come to understand that, in part because of, much higher job turnover, there's a need to retain and capture category knowledge and sourcing information, and, utilizing technology to do so, it becomes very effective. The technology also becomes a very effective way to scale expertise and best practices, and it ensures, compliance and a whole variety of other natures too. So, it's very interesting to see, technology become much more prominent in the CPO strategies for 2018. Now, when we look out, over the sort of mid-range term, and, I guess anytime I'm talking about this annual CPO Rising report, I get pretty excited because I see procurement opportunities that sit in front of it are just so massive. But, I really got excited by this chart specifically because for the first time, CPOs are focused on, an opportunity that presents itself with the use of advanced analytics. And this is not simply to do spend analysis, right? There is, we believe, a much larger opportunity that's in the offing for procurement organizations to begin to take their spend information, to begin to take their process information, to begin to take their supplier information, to begin to take data from third-party streams, and to begin to aggregate and consume it and process it and convert that data into intelligence, and then turn that intelligence into value. And that's a premise, the larger premise of the report going in. Savings, again, prominent, but not the most prominent. I think that continues to be a nice and promising trend. Now, the work for CPOs is, still large, and for many procurement organizations, the challenges and hurdles that they face in 2018 are significant, right? So, if we were to say that procurement as a profession has undergone a pretty significant transformation over the past 20 years, that still hasn't placed it at the front of the line when it comes to budgets. That still hasn't placed them at the front of the line when it comes to staff and talent. Now, talking with any number of CPOs over the years and this year, headcount, is a consistent challenge for organizations, but really finding and training and retaining talent continues to be a fairly major constraint, although I'll again refer to the panel discussion I was moderating earlier today, where the two of the CPOs said that they have been tasked by their organizations to find and bring new talent into the organization, get them through a training program, a 12 to 18-month program, and then push them out into the organization, because procurement offers a fantastic exposure to old and new employees alike, to really the full exposure of what an enterprise's business actually is. So, the hurdles, are certainly things that, need to be addressed and are in many cases. Now, if the mid-range CPO objectives, are focused on data analytics, I think that this chart, is absolutely aligned with the direction that I think the industry should be heading in. And I think it's clear that I'm not alone, right? A majority of CPOs feel that better data visibility and analytical capabilities, are the top game changer for CPOs in 2018. Certainly earlier engagement on sourcing opportunities has been, proven to deliver great value, right? We've done studies that have looked at the level of savings, the level of customer satisfaction, and sort of some of both the quantitative and qualitative results from a sourcing exercise. And, we've seen, in a quantified way that the earlier that procurement is engaged, the better the results are to be most likely. Now, Kevin, right, when you look at Determined's client base and you look at the strategies and actions that they're undergoing to transform their procurement operations, I mean, what are some of the things that stick out or stand out to you?
Yeah, sure. And as I mentioned earlier, we like to help our customers quantify the value they get out of their system. As you know, Andrew, there are dozens of KPIs that we can look at in the industry. But what we do is we talk to all of our clients and we try to find out what are the 3 to 5 key metrics that they want to hone in on that's important to their business. And we can take a look at those KPIs and look at their usage metrics through the system and come up with what we call our determined value chart to calculate a savings and an ROI number. And then now that we have this savings number, we use that as the guiding light of the relationship, right? This allows us to become an extension of their team and to bring to the table, a set of playbooks and action plans to help them find additional areas of value to transform their function. And as an example, are we enabling the right suppliers to drive adoption? Are we enabling the right categories of spend to help drive more spend through the system to drive more value? And back to the analytics piece, just want to touch on that for one second.
Sure.
We're starting to see the shift from companies getting out of the silo mode and go to more of the platform. So being able to look at, not only just the procurement process itself, but the upstream and downstream functions all integrated within the same platform so they can identify those additional areas of value as well.
Right. I just sort of dating back, right, a couple of years ago, one of the overarching theme of one of these reports was, how do you measure and quantify the value that procurement's delivering? And, as we saw a few slides ago, procurement organizations are really focused on trying to do that, right? In some respects, right, if you have great performance, but you're unable to communicate it, it's almost like that performance didn't happen, right? So, sort of marrying those two things together, getting the metrics right, having a mechanism to communicate it, I mean, in many ways is a game-changing, is a game changer in and of itself. But let's move forward and start to look at what we call the state of procurement in 2018. And, as I say almost every year, in 2018, the state of procurement is strong. And so let me show you what I mean by that. And so we talked about people first, data first, right? If there's a takeaway today, this is it. There's gold in these in your systems, right? It just has to be found, right? And so this is a new CPO who I've known for years, and sort of new procurement function, being established in a high tech, sort of post startup mode, but about $1 billion in spend, and so a little late to start thinking about procurement, but nonetheless, that's where they are. And so this new CPO is starting with spend data, and that makes great sense given the team that he has, given his own personal experience and success previously. Makes sense in the context of the story that we're talking about here in the report. And, again, the big data opportunity, right, it certainly does start with spend analytics and spend analysis and understanding who your suppliers are and what your spend is. But really the big data opportunity, really expands beyond that. Now, I've told you that we do the study, 12 years, 13 years now, I guess, running, sourcing. So what we're doing here is a little bit of a trend analysis, right? So sourcing has always been viewed as the most strategic aspect of a procurement operation, right? Opportunities to drive savings or find quality, leverage new strategies, find a new supplier, right? I mean, these can all add a huge amount of uplift to an organization. But if sourcing remains as strategic as it has ever been, it's being de-emphasized to a degree by procurement organizations today, right? And so, we've essentially asked the same question over the years, and where it was once the top strategy, and back in 2009, that aligned with the overwhelming need for procurement to deliver savings in the global recession period. This has trended down, but as we started to look at this more closely, the numbers are also, and the numbers that I'm showing you here are the average percentage of addressable spend that is competitively sourced in a given year in the marketplace. This number has gone down a little bit over the years, but it's still significant, right? Almost 50% competitively sourced. And what we've come to understand is much in the same way that PO processing is just sort of part of the natural fabric of what procurement does, so is strategic sourcing, and sourcing a significant amount of spend. And so as a result, it's no longer, sort of called out as a unique strategy. So, something to think about, trend line going, I guess the other way, and one of the reasons why, I think sourcing is viewed still as positively as it is, if no longer necessarily a new or focal point of a strategy, is that the talent and the capabilities are trending up. Over the longer arc, they're trending up, but over the last 4 years, specifically, in each of these in each of these capability areas in sourcing, right, we see the numbers ticking up, right? And so these numbers represent the percentage of procurement organizations that possess this capability, or each of these capabilities. And the thing that really, was called out, and I called it out with the red circle there, is that, the opportunity to leverage spend data to identify sourcing opportunities has really grown significantly. And while, you can look at these numbers and say, well, you still have a large part of the market that doesn't have a standardized sourcing process, that hasn't, gotten its hands fully around, standardizing its spend analysis process. This is true, but, as we've seen, sometimes the progress is not as fast as we would expect it to be, or as fast as we would like it to be. But the trend line is still, very positive. Another trend line that continues to be positive, although slow and steady in its move up and to the right, is this chart here, which shows the percentage of enterprises in the market today that have adopted each of the different technologies that really drive the source to settle process. I would say that, it's not a surprise that the more mature of these solutions, e-procurement and e-sourcing, continue to be the most popular. I think it speaks volumes of the opportunities that lie ahead of even the procurement organizations that have not matured to the degree that we might have thought they could or would have, and that an automated source settle process does still remain an exception and not the rule in the market. So, Kevin, obviously you've been working in this industry for a long time. I wonder if you've got any thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I actually love this chart, right? So e-procurement's up top, as you said, it's kind of been there for a while. Companies seem to have picked the low-hanging fruit of savings. But I'm excited to see what this chart's going to look like 10 years from now, right? What enters this chart from the bottom as these other components start to expand out. So having been in this industry for a while, for me, it's exciting to see this, and more exciting to see what it'll look like in the future. But, as I said, with the e-procurement being, the largest, that low-hanging fruit's been picked. That low-hanging fruit of savings has been picked. And so companies do need to look into these other areas to find additional opportunities for savings. And I think what's also important to note here is I think there's greater chances or faster time to value when all of these components are within one single platform, so they can get that predictive analytics on finding different areas of value between these different components.
Yep. And so 2017, right? So our firm takes several hundred inquiries each year related to technology strategy and sometimes technology RFPs and investment in the marketplace in these types of solutions. And 2016 I think was the first year where we had more inquiries that were for suites or for a coupling of applications as opposed to a single. And so, that's a trend that we've seen a long arc in coming and one that will continue. And with the CPO's focus on technology, right, we do expect these numbers to continue to advance. One of the other drivers why we think that these numbers will continue to advance is that procurement departments, right, so part of, their strategy, oftentimes is to invest in new technology, but the strategy is also to get more out of the technology you have today. And that means, becoming masters of that technology. And, in years past, we have asked CPOs in various points over the years to assess the different capabilities of their department at the department level. What are the things that you do well? What are the things that need improvement? And you know, it used to be that financial analysis would tend to be more towards the bottom, and that would be an example of something that the procurement organizations have gotten better at over the years. You know, what has consistently been at the bottom of the pile has been procurement's ability to get business value out of its technology investments, and you know, we're seeing that, you know, the proficiency, the technology proficiency of the average procurement department begin to trend up, and we look at this. It's not exactly a bell-shaped curve, but you know, what we do see is that you know, more organizations are trending towards the good, advanced, and very advanced than what we've seen in years past. And while some organizations still do really struggle to get out of the blocks with their technology investments, you know, there's been a big focus on making the solutions more usable over the years. There's been a big focus on deploying them in a faster capacity, right? The move to cloud has simplified a lot of the challenges that when this industry began in the late 90s, you know, or at least when I was first getting involved in it, you know, the path and time to value is much faster, and the relative intuitiveness and the capabilities of the procurement SaaS continue to get stronger, and that's going to continue to drive this market forward on the technology side. And it's important to begin to lay the groundwork, right? So for those of you that are listening in today, because there are some really significant opportunities in the offing. You know, a decent part of the report, and you know, a fair amount of the time that Matt York, who's our moderator today, you know, spends its focus on is some of the newer technologies that are starting to emerge as real value drivers and offer very large potential. Right? We've seen that a majority of CPOs look at advanced analytics as a potential game changer for their departments, and we believe that holds true for most procurement departments, that there is this opportunity to do so. And this I think is also I think you know, a pretty positive chart, which tells us that you know, 51% of CPOs believe that it's critical, or at least very important, to be on the cutting edge and to really you know, be leading as opposed to following from a technology standpoint. And this is a pretty dramatic shift. You know, even if you were to go back to, you know, the late 90s and a large part of the larger procurement transformation that we've experienced over the past 20 years was driven by the introduction of the internet and by you know, the supply management technologies that we were just talking about a few charts ago. You know, where it's, you know, and so procurement organizations, you know, benefited from these technologies even if they didn't optimize their use. And so we're now at a different point in time where CPOs are really looking and understanding the technology as a key strategy, as it is, you know, in 2018, and a top strategy as it was in 2017. You know, they're also looking at some of these emerging technologies, and these are technologies that, you know, in our view, right? So here's a list of the technologies that, you know, when we think of the innovation and what we've been calling the Industry 4.0 technologies, these are technologies that are either going to be built into your current supply management technologies or be very closely associated with it, right? These, you know, capabilities, you know, don't really shouldn't be viewed as independent of the normal technologies that we were just talking about, Kevin and I were talking about on that other chart. And so, you know, rather than going through all of these, you know, leave some of that discussion from my side, you know, to the report. But Kevin, right, you know, we're talking about, you know, innovation and, you know, bringing in some of the capabilities that exist in other parts of the market and getting these into the hands of sourcing and procurement professionals. What's your take, or maybe talk a little bit about Determin's approach here?
Yeah, I look at this, I think of, you know, the role of predictive analytics specifically in procurement I touched on earlier. Right, this is a developing technology which is really based on data collection, and it can provide, you know, trending on certain elements of the procurement process. Right, so if you consider the purchasing process as a whole, predictive analytics, you know, can help optimize spend by allowing you to place orders with the right supplier at the right price, you know, at the right time. So take item prices as an example. So using predictive analytics and based on the data collected, we can see the historical trends for the price of that particular item. So when a user is in shopping, you know, they can select, you know, the supplier that fits that price that best fits their needs. And so by using some of these newer technologies, we can develop these features and allow customers to realize these further savings, during their procurement process, as an example.
Right. And so, again, I'll call out, right, so going back to the other chart, why I think it's important for, whether or not you're adopting the latest, most innovative technologies, you should at least be tracking them. It took more than a decade for, sort of the core the main e-procurement solutions in the marketplace to transform and to offer more of a B2C, intuitive-like experience. The technologies and what Kevin just described, right? I mean, these capabilities exist in other parts of business today, right? If you were to look at the buy and sell trading algorithms that are used for automated trading on Wall Street, those are very highly advanced capabilities to take a plethora of inputs, crunch phenomenal amount of data, and are making instantaneous decisions and executing transactions. This can certainly be brought. Can be modeled and is being modeled, as Kevin's just talking about, in the procurement realm. And so a lot of the technologies that we're going to be talking about in the report, and we're going to leave it to the report, these are things that are really already have been proven elsewhere and are really starting to emerge within the supply management suites offered in the market today. So we're going to pivot from technology and the state of procurement and focus in, as we do each year, to look at the key performance and operational metrics in the marketplace today. So, I'll say it here, right? So spend management first. I say it literally dozens of times each year, and that is that visibility into spend is the foundation upon which a best-in-class procurement organization is built. And this VP, clearly understood that, went through a process, and having gone through the process, maintains the focus on that. And I'll come back to that point in a second. So what I'm showing you here are the average metrics, or the metrics, the market average metrics for the typical procurement organization in 2018. So the average procurement organization manages 62% of their spend. This is a number that has been relatively flat, and I'll come back to that point in a second. The savings numbers have been trending down over the past couple of years, right? It sort of maps to, in part, the focus and direction of organizations that are prizing quality and innovation at a level more, I guess, relative to savings than in prior years. Again, a lot of the savings opportunities and the low-hanging fruit in different categories have been attacked and gotten each year. So there's diminishing returns component. But the saving numbers are just sort of, I think, reflective of where we are in the marketplace. The addressable spend that is sourced is down a little bit over the past couple of years, but still up by significant measure when we go back a little bit more than a decade. Compliance numbers are up, still not where they should be, in our opinion, and the enabled suppliers number continues to sort of steadily move higher. I want to talk for a minute about spend under management, right? So, if I go back to my start in this industry, I spent a fair amount of time working with procurement organizations before I was an analyst, and really, at some level, doing something similar to what Kevin's doing, and not nearly as an advanced way, but really working with procurement organizations to help them prioritize and understand what's important. What are the value drivers of your organization? And I think we'd settled in. I don't mean just me, but the industry, that there was an opportunity to create value when procurement had the ability to influence spend. And in our research, we've later borne out that there is actual quantifiable savings that is realized when a new dollar of spend is placed under management. But what we've seen over the past couple of years from a priority standpoint is that CPOs are not as focused on increasing this number, and that speaks to the general maturity of the average procurement organization. It also speaks to maybe a shift in thinking as to is there value in going after some of the more difficult categories, and it's I mean, we've shown time after time that the procurement organizations that do place more spend under management, they save more, they have higher compliance rates, they get better customer service marks, their ties and collaboration with both the business and with functional partners is higher. There's a lot of things that really sort of emanate out of really having control and influence over your spend. But I think that as we move through 2018, we're going to look and spend a fair amount of time looking to understand, are there other ways to begin to think about best-in-class performance from a procurement context, because we have traditionally used the spend under management metric as one of the key metrics to determine who the leaders are in this marketplace, and when we've done that over the years very consistently, the best-in-class have also done better in all of these other key metrics. And so what we see here is that the best-in-class, the average best-in-class company, and for those of you that are less familiar, right, in any market study that Ardent conducts, we'll segment out the respondents based upon their performance in different categories or metrics. Best in class would be the top 20% of performers in any Ardent Partners study, and what we see are the average performance and operational metrics for that top 20%, the best in class, as compared to the all others group, the other 80%. And on a percentage basis, the gap and the value that that a best in class procurement delivers really is a significant impact that is a competitive advantage. And if there's any reason for a procurement organization to hesitate as to whether or not they should make the business case, these numbers bear out that there's great value and great leverage from a well-run and high-performing procurement organization, and it hits the bottom line, and in many cases it hits the top line. Now, I want to look at a couple of the drivers, right? So, how does the best-in-class, succeed? And what are the things? What are the drivers that enable them to outperform the competition? And in part, maybe it's the self-fulfilling prophecy that when you do things well, you get better engagement from the executive team. What we see here is that the best-in-class, in a very significant manner, are marching, much more in step with the larger organization and the goals and objectives there. We see that the best-in-class, from a visibility into key metrics and into key areas that really help you allocate your resources and figure out where those largest opportunities are. Again, not uniform, not 100%, but by comparison to the all others group, a significant visibility advantage. And as you would imagine, and for those of you that have seen these studies over the years, that visibility advantage is driven by the technology advantage, right? And so what we show here is the best-in-class, the percentage of best-in-class organizations that have adopted the different solutions, and in yellow, the percentage of all other procurement departments that have adopted the solutions. And the gaps between them are anywhere from, I think, between 20 and 80%, that the best-in-class organizations are more likely to adopt these specific solutions. But beyond just simply having the solutions in place, the best-in-class do a much better job getting value out of them. Their technology proficiency rates are significantly higher, their throughput volumes significantly higher, and as a result, the value generated or the returns generated from their investments in technology are also higher. Now, to do sort of a quick snapshot, best-in-class enterprises have shown that investments in improving internal systems and processes and enhancing external relationships with key partners are proven paths to better performance, right? The best-in-class have differentiated themselves with superior performance across the primary procurement metrics shown in the preceding a few slides ago, and they have these characteristics shown here to a greater degree and impact to gain their advantage in the marketplace, right? It starts at the top for the best-in-class procurement organizations, very strong leadership. That leader is able to communicate the value, to define the metrics that are key, to gain alignment with both the executives and stakeholders. There's a technology component, as we've just seen, and that cascades over into visibility. And again, it's not visibility into the data that's important. It's the ability to understand, what that data is telling you, the intelligence that you capture from that, and then the actions that you take on that, right? It's converting that data ultimately into value. And then, again, being a strong partner, right? I think that, as we look out at the full process, right? I mean, we are certainly seeing more P2P RFPs, where AP and procurement are partnered in, unifying a business process around a standard technology. And so we still have a few minutes left. I'm going to talk a little bit about, strategies for success or the recommendations that we have. And, before I dive into some of those, want to talk a little bit about, this move towards a more intelligent procurement operation. Right? There's not there's not a single technology or approach. There's not a cure-all that's going to get you there. And when I refer back to, having some of the building blocks in place, and certainly, will be, key recommendations in today's presentation, for those of you that, when you're going through the report and really looking at, some of the near-term opportunities and looking, at maybe how far away those are, you need to start building the foundation today. You need to start developing that ecosystem. Again, technology is going to be a key part of this, but it's also, the staff that you have in place. It's also the processes and the relationships that you build within the organization and the relationships that you build outside the four walls of the enterprise. And so, look at some of the strategies for success. We have at Ardent Partners been talking about procurement agility, for a long period of time, right? I think that, in many ways, the last 10 to 15 years of procurement success has really been built around a command and control approach, right? Let's get the spend under management. Let's get the policies and processes in place. Let's make sure that there's no maverick spend. People are buying against the right contracts with the strategic suppliers, and we have an organized and regimented operation, and that has been successful, and that has been fantastic. As we start to look out over the next decade, we start to look at what I just described as table stakes, right? You have an organization that is doing the things it should do, and at some point in time, you don't get accolades for that, right? It's you're just doing what you're supposed to do. And if you take the step back and you look at the level of innovation that we see, really across all markets, and across all supply markets, market incumbency and market leadership are much harder to maintain. This means that supply bases and turnover within them is going to happen at a much more rapid fashion. At the same time, the direction of business, right? If the 50% of the S&P 500 from 2000 are no longer in existence, the lifespan and opportunities for many companies is much shorter. These windows are closing much faster, and as a result, businesses need to be much more adept at shifting and anticipating the market trends, and procurement needs to be in lockstep with the leadership there. So, as you start to think about your organizations, you certainly have to execute on the plan that you have in place today, but you need to be starting to think about, well, what are the needs and demands of the executives and the business going to be in the next 2 to 3 years, and are we in position to deliver that? Likewise, what are the shifts that are occurring and likely to occur in the supply base, and are we tracking that, and are we developing strategies to be proactive rather than sort of reactive? I think again that the story for best-in-class procurement organizations, really does show that a procurement organization can be well organized and can deliver a competitive advantage. Those of you looking to build a business case, or those of you if you're ever struggling, please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to share our research and give you our insights. These are things that have been done very successfully over the recent history and even over the longer term history, and there's no reason to recreate the wheel. So whether you're getting that information from us or from solution providers or from maybe an event and from your own personal network, tap into and leverage the success of others that have gone through this. We look at innovation, being really an important and vital vital part of organization success. And one of the reasons why we remain very bullish on procurement's place in the market is, I think, the level of innovation that we do see in supply markets and the level of dependence that, companies and enterprises, their own performance has become much more directly linked to their supply chains. And that puts procurement, very squarely in the middle of business success and business performance. And I'll pull Kevin in here now because I know you've got some thoughts and comments on a couple of these here.
Yeah, particularly around the metrics. You and I talked earlier. I'm a strong believer in metrics are the key to transformation, and it's not just the metrics. I've talked a good bit about defining the right KPIs per customer. Calculating their savings based on usage metrics, but then also understanding what's driving those savings, right? So what are the playbooks and the action plans around those metrics and how to drive more and to get more and more value out of it? For instance, if we've calculated that a company saves $10 per PO by automating the PO process, right? Well, then how does that customer drive more POs through the automated process? Do we have the right suppliers enabled? Do we have the right categories of spend implemented? If cycle time is a key factor, a key metric to look at, what can we do to help drive that? Right. Let's take a look at your approval workflow process. So it's a combination of not just the metrics, but the associated playbooks around it. And to me, those things, and also going back to the top business pressure, being able to communicate that value. So quantifying the value, influencing more value, and then going back and communicating that value to again elevate the procurement function as a value organization and not a cost killer. I think is what's needed for that CPO to become that trusted strategic partner internally.
Right. And so one of the other things that, sort of building on that, is we have probably in the majority of these reports, right, we've always recommended that you have companies have sourcing pipelines and they need to keep those filled and active. But to have a spend under management pipeline, but rather, we're going to shift that recommendation this year, right? So rather than just going out and trying to place more spend under management, since that, does not appear to be as important to many CPOs as it has been in the past, you need to focus on the spend that you are managing and become much more effective in how you're doing that, right? And it's doing all the things Kevin said on the portfolio that you have today, whether that's driving more POs, whether that is looking at other supplier aggregation strategies or any of the other number of value drivers. It's having that plan and it's being very clear on what those metrics are, how they're measured, and the communication pieces Kevin was just talking about. Now, before we go to the next set of recommendations, right? I recall, used to be very, a lot of time in the CPO discussions were spent looking at and analyzing the relationship with finance and analyzing the relationship with the CFO. And one of the common strategies that came out of the relationship, right? The CPO is more likely to report into the CFO than any other person within the organization, and that's a number that's somewhere between 30-35%. It's in that range. The strategy that CPO started to employ was to hire a finance person, a CFO of procurement, if you will, to come into the organization, particularly large organizations, and to serve as both a liaison to finance, but also to help the entire procurement team understand finance's approach to procurement and to better speak the language and to find common ground. And that has been very successful. Apply a similar concept, right? If you believe at any level, and we at Ardent are fierce advocates that there's this huge opportunity in procurement's big data that is sitting out there today. It's very likely that you're not sitting on a team of data scientists, people who can come in, right? They don't need to know and understand procurement. What they need to do is they need to know how to do different types of analysis on large amounts of data. And so as you start to think about your organizations and the needs of the organizations going forward, it's going to make sense to start treading in those waters a little bit. And so a few more strategies, and we'll probably have time for a question or two. These are all technology focused, right? And again, when we talk about the age of intelligence and the opportunities that we do think, really will be game changers, right? These are going to be the catalysts that drive procurement as a profession to the next level of performance. Those of you that are struggling with your basic blocking and tackling, are going to be well served by getting your systems in place, by getting your operations in place, and getting the right team in place, right? And you're not going to just simply be able to start doing advanced analytics with big data if you don't have some of the basic tools in place. And so you've got to start where you are, but begin to make a track forward. Another top recommendation here would be that some of these advanced Industry 4.0 technologies are also embedded in business process software for other business functions. And so your IT departments are going to have exposure to those capabilities, and rather than trying to learn it from the start or from the ground up, within the procurement department, leverage the IT experience that exists within your organization, or find it outside. And so I'm going to pass it back to Matt here to see if any questions have come in. And Matt?
Yes, Andrew, we've got a question here for Kevin. In terms of procurement or source-to-pay technology, what are some of the criteria used to measure customer success, or is it even measurable?
Yeah, and honestly, I could spend an entire webinar on that question, so I'll try to be a little bit brief here. I know we're running out of time. But yeah, I've touched on this throughout this webinar, right? Without a set of metrics, it's very hard to drive adoption of the technologies that you use, that you invest in to drive that value, right? I've mentioned the determined value chart. We identify a core set of metrics that are important for that customer. Right, we calculate the savings based on their usage metrics, and then we apply a set of associated playbooks against that to help them continue to drive more and more value out of that. And just a quick story, I was actually at a customer a couple of weeks ago, a pretty large customer of ours, and we were reviewing their determined value chart, which is the savings that we've calculated for them. And they had I won't say the number, but it was tens of millions of dollars of savings on their chart. That's not usage metrics, that's the actual savings number. And they got really excited about the methodology behind, how we calculate that, that they're actually going to use that internally. And what they've also asked us to do is to break that down by country. So this is a customer that's rolled us out in over 30 countries. And so they want us to break it down by country so they can do comparisons across each country site. And so, as we've stated, you can put a set of metrics together. You can put a set of associated playbooks against those metrics to continue to drive value. And then third, you got to be able to articulate that value, right? And then the benefits for the customer is, it elevates their function within the organization. It helps them fight for internal investment dollars, helps them obtain that coveted seat at the strategic table. And I think equally as important, it makes them feel like they're on a winning team. And everyone wants to be on a winning team, right?
Oh, I'd say absolutely, right. And if I were to just chime in real quick, I would say that, for the, obviously, what Kevin's doing, right, is probably year over year. But what we see with a lot of procurement organizations that aren't working with an expert like Kevin and his team, they have an initiative, and year one, there's, a lot of effort and focus. And then, maybe they hit the number, maybe they come close to it, but, sort of the energy and momentum behind it tends to fade in a faster fashion. And whether we're talking about throughput metrics or adoption metrics or, something more bottom line, right? I think the important thing there is to continue that arc, right? And to continue to build on it. Don't just stop at Pareto, right? Continue to push forward. And, again, huge opportunities. Matt, pass it back to you.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Kevin. We've got a lot of questions that have come in. Unfortunately, we are at our time limit, so we are going to have to get back to all of you with some thoughtful answers. I want to thank all of our attendees for attending today. Thanks so much for coming on board. I want to thank Andrew and Kevin for their expert analysis and their input. And, we'll see you next time.